Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 IDRA EX South convening Power People Plan Building Ecosystems for Equitable Schooling. I am overjoyed to be here with you today, along with some just phenomenal people. My name is Dr. Paula Johnson. I am the director of the IDRA EX South. Um, and I really cannot say enough how thankful I am that everyone is here with us today. We are the EAC that serves Region 2, that is the Equity Assistance Center. We cover 11 southern states and the District of Columbia, which has approximately 23, just over 2,300 school districts and almost 29,000 schools. Excuse me. And our charge is to assist schools in eradicating vestiges of discrimination and segregation. And we do so through providing technical assistance at three different levels: universal, which is providing resources and materials; targeted, which is short-term professional development and technical assistance; and then we have our comprehensive or intensive level, our tier 3 services, which are much more intense and long-term. Our team provides online and in-person technical assistance to our district partners, and we have done so through a variety of methods, especially during the pandemic, where we were extremely responsive in meeting districts' needs during a time that none of us were prepared for. We, as a region, have the highest number of school desegregation cases that are still active. Some of these stem from cases dating back to the 1960s, and some are more recent. But our areas of focus, working with the Department of Justice and the Office for Civil Rights, focus on issues of inequities concerning race, gender, national origin, and religion. So I do not want to take up too much of your time this morning. I want to introduce our president and CEO, Dr. Selena Moreno. Well, not doctor, I'm sorry, jurisprudence, but Selena Moreno, who is our legal eagle, who is our beacon of hope and encouragement, and is just an all around amazing person. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. I keep saying Dr. Selena Moreno, president and CEO of IDRA.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I have the honor this morning of, just saying a few words and really the honor of serving with Dr. Johnson and an incredible team at IDRA, many of whom you're going to hear from over the next few days. For those of you who are still getting to know who IDRA is, we are a national nonprofit whose mission is to achieve equal educational opportunity through strong public schools to prepare all students to access and succeed in college. And we approach education through a multidimensional lens by advocating policy, training educators, conducting research, and engaging communities. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and during really these challenging and too often tragic times. It's been close to 3 weeks now since the horror in Uvalde, and the wounds are fresh and they color how we see our charge and our commitment. We stand with Uvalde and all students who have been impacted by violence, and we stand with you in your efforts to bring equity to our schools. We like to call ourselves and our partners in equity gadflies, not because we love bugs, but to honor social gadflies, people who, according to Socrates, interfere with the status quo in service of the truth and who rouse others from complacency. And we need that right now. And it's great to see so many of you equity gadflies join today, ready to do just that. And what a time to do it in, right? Wow. We want a world in which all students, when they go to school, they feel safe, they feel welcomed, and they can do so without having to leave any of their identities at the schoolhouse door. But we know that equity remains under attack. Because of the current climate, many educators are afraid to even have the most basic but authentic classroom conversations about discrimination based on race, gender, or national origin. and find it harder still to meaningfully address the real and deep rooted inequities in each of those areas. In recent years, states, especially in the US South, have engaged in attacks on professional development by enacting harmful policies. Many of you have heard on the news and read, um, that they are erroneously called anti-critical race theory laws, and they seek to erase the lived experiences of people of color and LGBTQ plus communities by limiting how certain concepts are discussed in the classroom. So, just for an example, Virginia's Executive Order number 1 directs the state education executive to end all policies, trainings, programs, and curricula that, quote, promote inherently divisive concepts in its Department of Education or schools. Virginia has already rescinded equity resources and programs, suggesting that research based interventions like equity audits, like culturally responsive teaching, are unlawful because they advance equity. And Texas and Georgia passed classroom censorship laws. Florida, under its state civil rights law, makes it an illegal act of discrimination to subject a student or state employee to any activity that promotes implicit concepts such as implicit bias, systemic racism, or affirmative action. And that law even authorizes lawsuits against schools in violation of the legislation. So, all of those bills are undermining our efforts to create culturally sustaining schools, and they attack the very goals of the federal equity assistance centers like the IDRA EX South. They undermine student civil rights at the very time when the nation suffers through a pandemic that really lays bare the injustices and fragility of our systems, but also, right, the imperative for strong public schools. And students are the ones who are feeling the effects most deeply. Students see some policymakers would rather spend time forcing schools to teach whitewashed narratives about race than address the traumatic racial harassment or systemic barriers to equal educational opportunity that many students of color face every single day. They understand that persecuting students based on gender identity is not just the work of schoolhouse bullies, but of many legislators in the US South. And students hear some statewide elected officials, like the Texas governor, promise to challenge Plyler v. Doe, the seminal U.S. Supreme Court case deciding that undocumented students cannot be denied the right to a free K through 12 public education. Tomorrow, we actually celebrate the 40th anniversary of that case, Plyler v. Doe, a case in which IDRA provided expert testimony, and we, and hopefully with all of you, will continue to fight for all children, regardless of immigration status, to have a high quality public education. Students also feel the frustration of their families who have long advocated better schools, but whose voices are often ignored, even as some leaders talk about expanding so-called parental rights. But I think all of us here know that sustainable education equity requires centering students, and it requires authentic family engagement as active partners in carrying forward the promise of our nation's most foundational civil rights laws. So if all students are to prosper, unencumbered by discrimination or undereducation, equity and excellence must be a priority. And that's why I'm so excited that Dr. Johnson and the IDRA team have curated powerful programming for you over the next 3 days. Dr. Johnson, I'm going to turn it back to you to introduce our very esteemed speaker and an equity gadfly himself, so we can all dive right in. Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. And now it is a privilege to introduce our first keynote speaker. Dr. Marlon James is an assistant professor at Texas A&M University, specializing in urban and multicultural education. He is also the faculty research fellow for the Center for Applied, Applied Research and Statistics at my alma mater, Prairie View A&M University. In his time at Texas A&M, Dr. James has served as the executive director of the Center for Urban School Partnerships, the program chair for urban education, and the chair of the Carter and Lark Lecture Series for Black History and Education. Dr. James's President and Chief Educational Consultant of the Equality and Equity Group, LLC. For over 2 decades, Dr. James has provided training and curriculum for promoting systemic equity in education and instructional equity in classrooms. His research is read around the globe and focuses on promoting optimal development among young Black men in urban schools, instructional reform, and ending the impacts of racism in public schools and higher education institutions. Convening guests, it is my immense pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Marlon James.
Good morning, everyone. Paula, I appreciate the introduction. Thank you to IDRA for this great opportunity to share a few words with our community of educators that have been gathered here this morning. I plan to be timely because so many people have invested so much time to put together a great convening for you all. And it starts promptly at 9:30. My challenge as a professor is I get into my lecturing groove at about an hour and a half. But I'm going to take about 15 minutes this morning to share some encouragement. My title of my presentation is A Touch of Hope: How Everyday Teachers Can Make Anything Possible Through Equity Pedagogy. I chose this title in large part because my teachers really gave me, they helped me to become who I am today. And throughout this presentation, you're going to hear about one of my teachers, Miss Sims. Um, and it allowed me, their work with me allowed me to move from poverty to the professorate. And I want to give you a formula based on the acronym HOPE that we can use to seek out hope on behalf of our children every single day in our classrooms. So, what I want us to try to do this morning is I want to prepare our hearts and minds for the coming days, the coming convening. I want to leave each of us today with a touch of hope. Hope is the ability to anticipate a better tomorrow despite the storms of today. We need a touch of hope, particularly given the events of the last month in the nation. In fact, given the last 2 years, 4 years of that nation. Um, But even as we gather, I ask that we keep in our hearts and our prayers the children, families, and teachers of Uvalde, of Buffalo, the Capitol Police who defended our nation bravely on January 6th, and the children, our children, who are struggling to make sense of it all. Our children, they are our future. They are our hope. They are why we are gathered here today. Our theme for today is power, people, plan, building ecosystems for equitable schooling. Let's define some terms. Power, the ability to affect change. Plan, a thoughtful strategy to promote individual, organizational, and systemic change. People, a collective of individuals determined to affect change strategically. And equitable schooling, the intentional enactment of schooling environments, experiences, and interactions that promote optimal academic, social, and emotional development among youth. In short, our theme suggests that we have any number of problems, but we are the solution. The fact is, we have over 54 million children enrolled in our K-12 public and private schools. During COVID, 43% of kids learned completely at home between 2020, 21, and 22. Students of color stayed at home at much higher rates, however. 78% of African American children did distance learning throughout 2021. You all know as educators that we have seen an uptake in student disengagement, student absenteeism, behavioral problems, and mental distress and racial hostility in our schools since kids came out of the COVID lockdown. Yet, research is slow to understand why. The CDC issued a study this year that has been largely ignored. A study that they have not really ever conducted focused on our high school learners. And what they found was alarming, but it was largely ignored. What they helped us to understand is that among the four measures of poor mental health and emotional health, those are persistent stress, anxiety, and depression for more than 2 weeks that changes kids' patterns of behaviors. Number two, persistent stress and sadness and helplessness, contemplation of suicide and attempted suicide. What they discovered is that post-COVID, these four measures of mental health reached all-time highs. It was statistically significantly different for young girls. In other words, this affected young girls more than anyone else. And when you look at African Americans, Native Americans were among cultural groups were disproportionately affected. For example, African Americans had the highest numbers in 4 out of 5 categories. When you look at LGBTQ students, their numbers were almost double of every other student group in all four of these areas. So this describes to us a problem. And it doesn't really sound hopeful, but hope requires a full accounting of present circumstances. Hope does not allow us to see the present circumstances permanent. Yes. In addition to this study, there's been a couple studies conducted on teachers, but very few. There's only been a couple nationwide polls on teacher health post-COVID. It really literally just has not been studied. What we find is that I searched thousands of databases and really only found about maybe 3 national surveys. But those national surveys, one conducted by NEA, found that at least 50% of teachers felt stressed, burnt out at work. 50% felt COVID negatively affected their families financially. 37% reported that COVID forced them to consider changing careers. And 55%, according to the NEA survey, 55% of the members of NEA were considering leaving the teaching profession before they really felt necessary. In addition, as Selena referred to earlier, teachers have also been blindsided by this political campaign designed to censor books, censor social emotional learning, and this fictitious movement to remove critical race theory from classrooms when critical race theory cannot be taught in K-12 classrooms, and no teacher in America is trained on how to use critical race theory in classrooms. So teachers are facing a set of pressures that they have not faced before, and I have seen levels of distress in educators from around the country that I have never seen in 2 decades. Unfortunately, kids are experiencing the same level of trauma that teachers are experiencing. But I believe a careful reading of a CDC report from 2022, it tells us when you look at these 4 levels of poor mental health among kids, this is where we find our hope, that among children who felt welcomed at school, close to a teacher or their peers at school, all 4 of these signs of mental distress was significantly lower. How the challenge is that our students of color felt least welcomed at school. But the CDC recommended to help our kids overcome this mental distress, we should focus on a nationwide effort to create welcoming and supportive classrooms in schools. However, that message did not filter into districts and filter into schools in a way that allowed us to really take prompt action. Today, I want to present to us in the next few minutes here an acronym of HOPE. Remember, hope is the ability to look at the present, to imagine a better possible future while still being fully aware of the present circumstances that we're facing. Hope is not pretending like a problem doesn't exist, like the Capitol wasn't raided. Well, that's not hope. That's delusion. So we fully account for the situation we're in. We have kids who are experiencing a mental distress we've never seen in our country, and we have teachers who are really the only group of people in the country who are qualified and positioned to help children. I say that because the American family structure changed around World War One, where most of the responsibilities for raising children was pushed into schools. And it wasn't until 2021 under COVID that parents received the primary responsibilities of educating children back. It had been generations before parents had done that. So I want to present a hopeful framework using the acronym HOPE. I'm going to give you four things. There's an H, there's an O, there's a P, and there's an E. If we don't have time to get to the E, that's okay, which because we have a presentation later today and on Thursday where we'll demonstrate the equity imagination as to help teachers prepare equity lessons. So if we don't get to that one, that's okay. But let's get to healing. The first letter is H. Heal yourself. Social emotional wellness describes our efforts to reach our full human potential while supporting others' optimal development. It's just not about us, it's about us healing ourselves so that we can heal others. The challenge is we want teachers to help heal children when teachers themselves are hurting. Equity starts with the social emotional wellness of teachers. Teachers cannot give what they don't have. There's this research by Beth Duelmeyer, one of my former students, on teacher regenesis. She studied teachers who had gained 30 pounds in their teaching career and then lost 30 pounds and kept it off. She explored the changes they made in their lives, the counseling, the nutrition coaching, the changing of their friendships so they have a positive environment to work around. Every teacher needs to we have to invest in ourselves, because if we're not healing ourselves, we cannot promote healing in our students. I wish I had more time to go into that, but every teacher, look at how much you sleep, look at what you eat, look at the counseling services available to yourself. You all, 2 years ago, I made an investment in myself. I've lost 15 pounds. I do counseling every week. I hydrate throughout the day, vitamins, supplements, workout, you name it, because in order for me to fight for equity and justice, I have to treat myself with justice. I can't say I'm going to advocate for justice for kids all over the country and treat myself less than a human being. So first step is to heal yourself. Quickly, optimism. Optimism is the ability of a teacher to look into a child and name their unique intellectual gifting. Quick story. Miss Sims, fifth grade. I'm born into a family. My mom and dad got divorced soon after I was born. I was the third kid. They had moved to Chicago looking for opportunities from Louisiana. And I was not a good kid. I was the kid you would not want in your class. But Miss Sims saw optimism despite my reading disability, despite my delayed speech and the speech therapy that I needed. She looked into me and said, "Son, you can't read that well yet, but you can memorize anything and you can understand any text and your vocabulary is off the chart." She said, "You could be anything. You could be a doctor. You could be an astronaut." And I believed it. Her optimism spoke volumes in my life. So here's the statement. A kind and hopeful statement from a teacher can set a child's future ablaze with possibility. But you have to bathe your statements you make to your students in optimism. We have no idea where our words will lead children. Miss Sims' words led me to where I am today. Potential. Equity pedagogy requires us to be potential focused rather than problem centered. Problems And imperfections are commonplace in the human experience. It's just part of life down here on earth. Um, but because it's commonplace, when students experience problems, we shouldn't lower our expectations for them. In fact, the more problems they experience, the higher our expectations should be, because education, them achieving a great education in America, is key to creating opportunities for them to change their circumstances. So please do not deprive them of this hope. That potential has to come from us, by us being focused on potential, not on problems. Lastly, the equity imagination. We have to situate our lessons. In other words, we have to connect our lessons with their lives. When we connect our lessons with their lives, we can take advantage of schema that kids are developing throughout the day. And we can build our lessons on top of what they're being exposed to in youth culture. This allows our lessons to be authentic. It allows our lessons to communicate care. And care in teachers triggers a set of responses in children that leads to academic success. Simulation. You have to imagine your lesson ahead of time. Over 20 years, I've developed the ability to simulate my lessons before they ever happen. Therefore, I can teach without fear. Once you learn to simulate lessons in your mind, you are free to teach without any fear of failure. Thirdly, synthesis. Synthesis is focused on creativity. Ladies and gentlemen, we as teachers, we have to release our creative potential. There has been no other professions that I can know in the nation that has given over our right to be creative within our sphere of expertise. We are experts at teaching and learning, but quite often we give over that right to be creative to other people, and they design our curriculums, they design our assessments, they design our textbooks. But we have to take hold of our equity imagination, so that we have the right to create on behalf of our students. Now, lastly, hope. In the African American community, hope has been instrumental. Even during slavery, Black folk had this hope that if they can just get north. We had this hope that if we can just get emancipated. We had this hope that if we can just get citizenship. We had this hope if we can just get schools built for our children. We had this hope that if we can just vote, if we can just get desegregated. Hope has always been connected to equity. You cannot pursue equity without holding fast to hope. And hope is fulfilled when equity is realized. So listen, stir up your hope that you can fulfill your life passion through teaching. Stir up that hope, because when you allow yourself to be touched by hope, you'll have plenty of it to share with your students. And listen, they so desperately need hope today. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your attention. And I hope that you enjoy this convening.
I cannot say enough about this man. I am so happy to be walking alongside him in some work that we are doing. And I just want to say right now, thank you to him personally, that he accepted this call, because I asked him to do quite a few things during the convening, just out of conversations that we have on other projects. And I'm like, people need to hear you. People need to hear this. Can we do that at the convening? Will you do a keynote? Will you do some sessions for us? Like, it was really just the hope mentality is really something that sparks something in me, that the healing, optimism, potential, and equity imagination. When I hear hope, it makes me think of growth mindsets. It makes me think of reframing. It makes me think of taking on our power, because I'm not empowering anyone. My job, my hope is that I would help teachers, parents, and students find their power and help them elevate it. I cannot give power to anyone, but all of these notes on how we have to serve ourselves first before we can serve others, just gives me that hope mentality. I really appreciated the words that Dr. James has shared with us this morning. And so right on time is 9:30. So Fly, fly, fly. Enjoy the next 3 days. We do have opening keynotes each day, and we will have some powerful closing remarks on day 3 after our final session. I hope that you enjoy your time with us this week and go learn some great things. Be well.